Well, hi there. I've got some bits in my hair sticking up. But yeah, shouldn't really be doing this now. But yeah, I wanted to talk about a very, it's kind of an unfortunate topic. It's about domestic abuse. I'm Blackbright, broadcasting out of the UK. Welcome to my channel. First time you're passing through, thumbs up, thumbs down, and you can subscribe or interact with my subscribers and do comments and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to talk about domestic abuse as it relates to illegal immigrants. Can you imagine that as as a person, a citizen, let me call it a citizen for want of a better word, as a citizen or somebody who's settled in the UK, a documented person who's got all their papers intact, them going through domestic abuse, let alone illegal immigrants who have come here on the promise that their partner is going to marry them, or whatever reason they came with their partner, only to find that their partner is no longer intending to marry them and is holding them to ransom. And some serious abuse is going on. Really, really serious abuse. And it's so sad. You might say, yeah, serves them right, they shouldn't be in this country and blah, blah, blah. But you never know people's circumstances. You have somebody, say, for example, you're living in this country where you're no, just suppose, let's use an example then. You're from a different country and you've met somebody in the UK online and you've been going back, they've been going to your country, you've been coming back to them, and you've formed a really good relationship. And as far as you're concerned, this person shows the best qualities. That's what normally happens. When you meet somebody, you see their best qualities. You don't see their dark side. And then you come over, he says, oh, I'm talking about he because in this particular circumstance, it was a man, but I know that men are victims of domestic abuse as well. But this was a female who had come into the country under the promise that the person that she was coming to was going to marry her. They lived together for a little while. Then all of a sudden, her visa runs out. He won't go with her to renew it. She needs his endorsement. She needs him to go with her to the Home Office or to complete those forms and show that they're still living together, that they're still doing things together. And he refuses to do it. After he refuses to do it, and she is in the country and her visa is expired and she can't get out because she's become reliant on him because she can't work on the visa that she's on and she can't access public funds. She's totally reliant on an abuser. Can you imagine how that must feel like? I was reading a case not so long ago where this happened to a woman. The man hit her in the head with a camera. She's got staples in her head, beats her up. She has to have sex with him at whim, how, when, where, however way he wants it. He tries to strangle her sometimes. He punches her in the stomach, kicks her, and all sorts. I mean, I don't understand what kind of person can do that to someone. She said that, he gets drunk and he's on drugs. She's afraid to call the police because, she's afraid that the police might report her and find out that she's illegal. So she's really a vulnerable person. And this is just one incident out of many. And all I'm saying is that, even though if you're in an abusive relationship, there is always help. Don't let your abuser convince you that there is nobody out there to help you. They have victim support. I don't know if people speak English or not, but they have an organization called Victim Support, which is for domestic abuse victims. And they have other they have other organisations to help. And they do also help illegal immigrants. I don't know to what extent, but the illegal immigrant has to be prepared to shock the perpetrator. And a lot of illegal immigrants don't want to do that. They're terrified that supposing the police don't lock up the perpetrator and that perpetrator is on the loose and they come back for them. So they have all those kind of fears that makes them not want to betray the person who's abusing them. They prefer to take the licks and maltreatment than to shock that person to the police. Because if that person is a foreign national, and usually they are foreign nationals because these people, some of them are British citizens, very, very few are British citizens, but some of them, they probably come from the EU or they've come from other parts of the world, and they come and they're settled in the UK, and then they decide to bring their girlfriend over or whatever, and then they spend time and they spend the relationship, and then whatever it is, whether it's the coronavirus, whether it's frustration, whether it's alcohol, whether it's mental problems, whatever it is, their demeanour changes, their behaviour changes, and they lash out on the person who is closest to them. And so you have situations where there's a lot of women being abused. Some women are being abused by one person. Some women are being abused by in-laws, you know, the whole, especially in some Asian cultures. If the female doesn't obey or do what she's supposed to do, the whole family can turn on her. And so you have vulnerable people who are not, and I'm just really kind of thinking about the illegal immigrants for now, because it's bad enough, like I said, when you are legally in the country and to be abused. But victims must be prepared to report it, and they must take photographs of their injuries. And they must, you know, it's really hard. They do have refuges that women can go to, and men, but they have refuges that women can go to. And you can escape if you get that window of opportunity. But you must take photographs, even if you have to do it surreptitiously, even if you have to do it secret late at night when you're going to the toilet. Take photographs of your injuries, because you can, if you've come on a visa. I mean, technically that visa should not have expired. But if you've come on a visa, on a spouse visa or under your partner visa, and you can prove that you are a victim of domestic abuse, there are lawyers who can get you legally settled in the UK. But you must be willing to offer that information and share the information and show your injuries and show that you are a genuine victim of abuse. And so there are pathways for you to do that. I don't really want this to be a long, I say this all the time, but I just blabber on, don't I? I get so involved. So, to get help to remain in the UK, or to obtain emergency or temporary accommodation, get financial aid for solicitors, and receive help with your children, victims must be prepared to disclose details about the violence and the perpetrator. Collate evidence about the injuries, apply for a court order to prevent further abuse, and get an injunction. So technically you are protected regardless of your immigration status if you are experiencing domestic abuse, and you have the right to protection by the police and the courts. You need to prove that you're serious about their allegations. So what happens in reality if you are an overstayer? Ongoing super complaints have been submitted by Liberty Immigration Services and Southall Black Sisters, because the police have been shopping victims who have insecure immigration status to the Home Office for the purpose of immigration enforcement. It is unlawful, but it has been happening, and that is why a lot of people who are undocumented are afraid to call the police, are afraid to call 999, and they just suffer the abuse. So I don't know how they get to feel safe. If the overstayer who has become a victim of serious abuse formerly had a visa that was authorised because she or he was the spouse or a partner of the perpetrator, and that now, because of serious violence, the victim cannot live with the perpetrator, she or he can apply for indefinite leave to remain in the UK. Victims will apply online. They go to www.gov, G for golf, O for Oscar, V for Victor.uk and put SET, S for sugar, E for echo, T for tango, D for delta, V for Victor. That's 2 words. SET DV in the search engine on that website. And you can only apply online for an indefinite leave to remain if you were given permission to stay as a partner of the British citizen, a person settled in the UK, or a member of the armed forces who's served for at least 4 years. Or you came here as a partner on a temporary visa that has not expired and the relationship ended because of domestic violence. You can show evidence of abuse against you. Like I said, take photographs. If you have no money to support yourself while applying, you can complete a separate form. I'm going to put the link below, and that will direct you to the application form if you are unlawfully in the country and you are experiencing domestic abuse. And it will also give you the form, lead you to the form where if you don't have any money to apply. Okay, so the SET DV form allows victims of domestic abuse to apply for indefinite leave to remain in the UK. If perpetrator is a foreign national, domestic abuse is considered a criminal offence and they could be deported. So you could end up with the perpetrator being deported and the actual victim staying in the country. Many victims feel guilty and do not want to disclose the information, but your life is on the line. You have to think about yourself. Many women do not realise that they have legal rights under the criminal law and civil law. Civil law is aimed at protecting the victim and compensation, and criminal law is aimed at punishing the perpetrator. A lot of victims worry that the perpetrator may get deported, they may be arrested and sent to prison, or they may be released on bail. They have no recourse to public funds, that's another worry. They feel guilty, they feel vulnerable, they've got no money. And they can't see a GP. There's repercussions of further abuse. The whole family turns on them. Children can be taken away. And so on top of the abuse, they've got all of those other concerns. In Asian families, in-laws can gang up on the victim, overwork them, take away their jewellery, confiscate their phones in isolation. I mean, that can happen in any culture. But yeah, I just know some experiences where that has happened in the Asian culture. Okay, also death in the family, that can be a reason why domestic abuse exists. If it hasn't happened in the past, that can cause a strain on the relationship through blame, resentment, guilt, substance abuse, alcohol, drugs, misdirected anger. When a child dies in the family, and whether it's the father or whoever's fault it is, sometimes that gives rise to domestic abuse. Male domestic abuse victims, vulnerable adults. You get some women who are abusing men, especially if they're disabled or weak for some other reason, vulnerable for some other reason. Whether they've got mental illness, they're reliant on the partner, maybe they have language problems, literacy problems. Sometimes it's because the man won't hit a woman. The woman feels as though that gives her the right to abuse him. Sometimes men are afraid of the repercussions of hitting a woman. When it comes into the eyes of the police, are they going to be seen as the abuser? So they don't hit the woman, and instead the woman hits them and abuses them. Sometimes women tell deliberate lies to control the man or threaten to tell deliberate lies. Sometimes if they've got a joint account, there's financial abuse by the woman. Sometimes the woman threatens to restrict the father from seeing the children, the man. Sometimes they get male friends to bully their partners, and they're in such a confined and restricted environment. This is all what happens to men men who are abused, victims of domestic abuse. It happens. And men are kind of suffer it because they see it as a perception of weakness, and they feel embarrassed and all that kind of stuff. So it's not easy, whether it's a male or a female. Domestic abuse, not nice. I remember when I was young, so about 17 or 18, and before I got, my first husband, and he hit me a couple of times, and I used to run down to my friend, and he always used to find me, and he used to beat up my friend as well. I mean, fortunately, I never got hit in a way where, I had any marks. But my husband was so jealous and possessive, he did not want me to go anywhere. And if I never pick up the phone at a certain time, and if I wasn't on call 24/7, a problem. So yeah, like I said, my abuse, my domestic abuse, I don't want to minimize it, because it was still a sense where a man was dominating me in that way, even though it was occasional and I didn't suffer any bruises or anything like that. I still know how I felt back then as a young woman. I still know that how I felt frightened, and how when he put the key through the door, how my stomach churned, and that feeling of fear, wanting to get away, and that feeling of helplessness. I can still recall how that made me feel, so I can imagine when it's 10 times, 20 times worse, and these victims suffer this kind of, people, they're strangling them, have them at knife point. I mean, it's just really psychotic abuse. And I don't know whether by watching these programs, or violent programs on TV, why it's getting worse in the home. But this kind of abuse is not normal. Back in the day, a man might lick a woman and say, "Go sit down," or whatever he might used to say. Not right, but it'd just be the hand. But these men these days, not only are they hitting women with objects, but they're drunk, they're under the influence, they're not rational beings. So you can imagine they've got no kind of gauge. Anyway, if your leave to remain depends on you staying with a spouse or unmarried partner, you will need to get legal advice, and that's going to cost money. So I don't know how that works. And like I said, contact victimabuse.co.uk. I'll put the email address below, just in case there's somebody who needs it. Immigration restrictions could be a hindrance to people getting help, which is a shame. Domestic abuse has got worse during the lockdown. People just can't get away. Or the person that you thought you loved now gets on your bloody nerves. And you can imagine if you've got somebody with issues or substance abuse issues, you can imagine how that pans out. And children in the house watching and seeing that, how that affects them. A lot of children in these homes where domestic abuse exists. It's really, really a sad state of affairs. So when there's domestic abuse is worse during lockdown. Alcoholism, paranoia, insecurity, possessiveness, jealousy, boredom, adverse childhood experiences, resentment. And then you have these men, I'm just going to say men for now, who target different parts of the woman. Whether it's their face, because they don't want them to be, because they see them as too beautiful and they don't want anybody to be attracted to them. Whether it's their head, because they want to if they're intelligent, they want to kind of dumb them down. Whether it's their stomach, because they resent the fact that they may not have children, or they won't give them children, or whatever. Sometimes these attacks are targeted. Break their arms or their legs. I mean, we have situations where they break their arms and bloody legs in domestic abuse. When you think about domestic abuse, I mean, I don't know how many of you saw Sleeping with the Enemy, but when I think of domestic abuse back in the day, it was like a slap, and that was domestic abuse. But today's domestic abuse, I mean, it can end up in manslaughter. That's how severe it is. It's not the same level it's like accelerated massive, massive time. But regardless of whether it's a lick, one lick, or a thump, or somebody using a weapon, the fear and those feelings are the same. Those emotions are still the same. That feeling of it, you can't get away, that feeling of helplessness and vulnerability. And normally it stems from controlling behavior, emotional, using emotional blackmail, guilt pulling, and sometimes after they lick you and thump you up, they're talking about, oh, I'm so sorry, I never meant to do it, I never meant to hit you so hard. Oh, please forgive me, I love you, I only did it because I love you, and all this bloody crap. It's not even funny, but you have women who say, my husband said he was sorry, he said he'd never do it again, and yet it gets worse the next time. Once you let them get away with it once, it gets worse. That's why I need just chip. And then you have to grow, and then sometimes it's the silence after them lick you and then beat you, and you don't know what's happening next, and you're sitting there waiting. You don't know whether they're going to come back and lick you again, and they're up in them just silent. All of that is a part of the power, a part of the control. So isolation, no friends, restricting phone usage. I mean, I can't give too much details because a lot of this information I discover through counselling and stuff like that. So, but it is all over. It's rampant, and it's getting worse during the lockdown. It really is. And then a lot of these men, they force dependence. They force the women to be dependent on them by damaging or destroying their passports, refusing to marry them. They're not giving them any money, so they're totally reliant. The woman has to give them sex if they want food. They threaten to take the children away, take the children out of the country. They isolate them so they have no outside help. They sometimes even threaten to kill them and kill their parents. So one of the tips is never tell a new boyfriend that you've been abused in a previous relationship, because many of them will seek it as permission to abuse you again. So there is a telephone number here, 0207 364 2448, if you know of any person who is illegal and is suffering domestic abuse, even if they're not illegal, but they're suffering, that you could possibly get some advice from that number. And you don't have to give your name or your details or your address. You can just say, look, I need some advice, and they can point you in the right direction. But yeah, it's not an easy road. It's not an easy road. Yeah, so that's not a very good subject, but I really felt I needed to do it because I came across something, and like I said, I deal with a lot of things through counselling. But when you think of people who are illegal, and it made me think about them. Not that I had somebody illegal coming to me, but when you think about the potential of that happening to somebody who is illegal, and I felt as though I needed to see what I could find out to help them. Because, my mind always does overtime, and for some reason I do try to I do want to try and help those who can't help themselves, or at least offer some kind of advice. And the most important advice I would say is you can ask for help, even though if your partner is saying because you're illegal, no one's going to help you. That is not true. And that's the real point I want to get across, that regardless of whether you're legal or not illegal, you can get help. It does mean shopping the person who's abusing you. So you have to have the courage to do that. You have to be prepared to betray the person, the abuser. You have to be prepared to witness against them. And that is sometimes the hardest thing for people to do. But it's your life. And whose life is more important, yours or theirs? And that's all for now. Bye-bye.